All right, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are in a weird spot. They were kind of last year's dark horse. They were kind of the media darlings in a lot of ways. A lot of people were wondering, could they take that next step from being a team that won a playoff game last year to a team that maybe is making a deep playoff run? Instead, they missed the playoffs altogether. Now, I thought a chunk of that was they just looked a lot worse once Trevor Lawrence got injured kind of 2/3 of the way through the season, but there maybe are some other issues as well. So what do the Jaguars do here to get back to that, the hype of being a potential contender as opposed to just a decent team? Well, okay, let's get into it. So this is their cap space and cash situation. Not a bad situation, not a great one either, but there's some money to work with. Where things get a little bit hairy though is when you look at a couple of their key free agents, because they don't have a ton of key free agents, but it's really the players themselves where things get interesting. These are a few of their free agents, and their projected cap hits annually as listed next to them. And Josh Allen, Calvin Ridley, and Ertz Cleveland, they just traded for Cleveland, so you probably want to keep him, I would assume. But Ridley and Allen are guys that you don't want to let go, right? Like, we can start with Calvin Ridley, who, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that it went perfectly last year for Ridley. I think they were expecting more from him. I do. But it went pretty well. Like, he was still a pretty good player for them. Like, he definitely had an impact. And I think the issue with Jacksonville and why they quote-unquote overpaid for Christian Kirk and why they traded for Calvin Ridley is because Lawrence's first year, their number one receiver was Jamal Agnew. They needed some help to make that work. And so they said, let's go out and let's get some help. And I think that it kind of did that. It wasn't perfect, but I don't want to let Ridley go. I also think $17 million is too low. I don't think he's staying for $17 million. I think that someone's going to pay him over $20 million. Again, because what he did that one year in Atlanta when he had 1,300 yards, and he's still been a pretty good player outside of that. So, yeah, I think that it might cost a little more. And Josh Allen is obviously, he's someone they're probably going to franchise tag. I'm assuming that's what's going to happen. But will he play on the franchise tag? We're seeing more and more players say, you know what? I'm not playing on the franchise tag. If you want to work out a long-term deal, we can do that. But if you're going to franchise tag me, trade me to a team will pay me a long-term deal. So maybe you have to pay more than just the $24 million, which I think he would get more than $24 million in the open market as well. He's an elite edge rusher. So, yeah, they have the money to pay these guys. I think that they can pay those guys, but then the question is, how do you get better? There is a way you can clear up some more money, which I kind of am just always confused why this is a thing. But Cam Robinson for the Jaguars, they can clear up $17 million if they want to, but they love Cam Robinson. They're huge fans of Cam Robinson, who I don't think is terrible, but I don't think he's, I'd rather have $17 million than Cam Robinson personally, and you can kind of spread that money elsewhere. Maybe that's something you do, even if you have enough money to re-sign the other players I mentioned. Maybe you get rid of him, try to find a cheaper replacement for $5 million, and then you can find other ways to help out the roster. Because again, for Jacksonville, I think there's kind of two main ways that they can get better. The first is just Lawrence gets healthy and plays like he did in the first half of last season. That alone should get you kind of to a next step. But the other way is they have to find more talent on this roster. There are places where they have to patch up, but there are things that have to get better. Like, look at this chart. This is where where the Jaguars ranked in terms of Pro Football Focus grades at each positional category. And you can put a little asterisk on the passing game if you want to with 12th. It was a little better than 12th. It was a little better than 12th when Lawrence was out there. Obviously, once Lawrence got kind of injured, his grades was lower, and then the backups, wasn't as good. So I would say it was better than 12th overall. But the receiving, just 22nd. Like, you put a lot of resources into it. It did not fully work out. Is that something you address through the draft? Perhaps. But you only get so many picks. And if you don't have that much cap space, what else do you do? Because, your pass blocking was 21st, run blocking was 31st. You want to patch up that offensive line. Running game was just 22nd. Defense was good. Now, the pass rush, it's all Josh Allen, right? That's just the issue. And I know Trayvon Walker had 10 sacks last year, but he wasn't getting consistent pressure. He did get the sacks, which is good, but you want to start to get the consistent pressure on the other side, and it was really just all Josh Allen a lot of times. The coverage was really good, though. Coverage made up for it. Coverage is very good. Coverage can be fluky year in and year out, but I think you hope with all those young players in the secondary, it continues to play well. I would still like them to go out and get another pass rusher. I would. That's just how I view it. But maybe Trayvon Walker kind of steps it up next year and continues to improve, because he did improve from year 1 to year 2. And those athletic guys tend to just take some time to fully get as good as you want them to get. So we'll see if he can do that. But yeah, as a whole, there's pieces that they have to fix. The offensive line has to be fixed, and you only have so many draft picks to do it. So how do you fully get better? Again, this is kind of the full page here. $21 million in cap space, $68 million in projected cash, which again, just a projection. And it can also, the cost to sign everyone that's a free agent would be $41 million, but they can, free up $17 million as well. So they can definitely do it. They can definitely sign all these guys and pay another contract if they want to. Like that's possible. The question though is, you can't do it that much. Like they don't have a ton of wiggle room right here. And how much can you improve? I really think for the Jaguars, it's kind of simple analysis, but I think it's less about who you bring in and more about just, can these young players maybe step it up in certain areas? Like if you keep Calvin Ridley, will he step it up and be, Atlanta Calvin Ridley again? Because again, I thought he was fine this year, but just maybe not like a great number 1 receiver like we've seen him be in the past. But maybe he could be if he can step it up, if Lawrence can stay healthy and maybe even take a step forward. Forget about get back to first half of last season, maybe even be better than that this season. That could go a long way. Maybe even, if Trayvon Walker can, again, I know, whatever side of the argument you're on, you have the ammunition to say that you were right about Trayvon Walker, right? Because his advanced stats haven't been great. His sacks are 10 sacks. So maybe if you like Trayvon Walker, that's fine. I'm still not a particular fan because I care more about advanced stats. But maybe he steps it up, which I think is totally possible. And if he can step it up, well, now all of a sudden you have, 2 great pass rushers, a really good secondary, a number 1 receiver, and now Christian Kirk can kind of go back to being just Christian Kirk. Trevor Lawrence can be great. Like that feels like a loaded team, like people thought it was last year, but they would still have to improve the offensive line. So that's kind of got to be the one thing you have to improve elsewhere, I would think. So do I think the Jacksonville Jaguars could potentially be a championship contender this following season? I actually kind of do. I don't, usually the way you're a championship contender is you need to be like top 7 in either quarterback play, receiving play, or coverage. And you need to have 2 of those 3. That 2 out of 3 is usually good. If you get all 3, you're golden. But usually you look at the teams that end up being like frauds, it's because they're either only good in one of those or none of them. Like the Eagles last year weren't top 7 in any of those categories. And, that's kind of a notable thing, stuff like that. The Jaguars, last year, they were top 7 in quarterback and in coverage until Lawrence got banged up. If they can kind of replicate that and the receiving core can just be good enough, that's where things get interesting. That's their pathway, I think, to being championship contenders, and we'll see how it works out. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.